So yeah, this is how it went down today. I was actually at the briefing yesterday, and of just Matt Miller, the press secretary, announcing the ceasefire. It was delayed by an hour because the announcement was coming in, and the Biden administration had to give the big announcement to Biden in the Rose Garden. So the White House took the lead, and it was rumored that Blinken would be coming in today, the following day, but we didn't know for sure. And Blinken had just spoken at the Atlantic Council, which is this think tank in downtown DC, which is the unofficial think tank of NATO, sort of the base of transatlanticism in Washington, sponsored by the arms industry, by NATO itself, as well as by the United Arab Emirates and various pro-Israel Israeli interests. And Blinken was interrupted there multiple times by the heroic activists who camped out outside his mansion on Chainbridge Road in Northern Virginia day after day over the course of this genocide. Several of those activists got in the room. So I was actually unsure whether Blinken would decide to do another curtain call after that experience, which, it also earned headlines. The heckling earned the headlines. No one really cared about Blinken's excuses and blaming of Palestinians for their own destruction. And yet he decided, we learned at like 9:30 a.m. today that Blinken was coming back in. And so, the whole press corps showed up. And I have been going to these briefings over the past year. After getting a few questions in, having to edge my way in, they just wouldn't call on me anymore. I always followed the process. I always respected the process. I didn't interrupt. Didn't want to especially interrupt other reporters. And I went in the normal way. I went in with a day pass. Sam Husseini went in with a hard pass. He has like full State Department credentials. And we thought that it was extremely important to stage a humanitarian intervention in the final press conference of Tony Blinken. So we'll show you what it looked like if you haven't already seen, though I assume most of you have. But, here's one for the record, for the history books. And this is Decensored News put together a really nice edit of my intervention.
I have even greater respect, even greater appreciation for you asking the tough questions, for you holding us to account, being on the receiving end. Sometimes that's not always the most comfortable thing, not always the most enjoyable thing, but it is the most necessary thing.
300 reporters in Gaza were on the receiving end of your bombs. Why did you keep the bombs flowing when we had a deal in May?
I'm happy to address
questions.
We
all knew we had a deal. Everyone in this room knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing.
I'm happy to address
Why did you
questions when we get a
sacrifice the
chance.
rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism? Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed when we had a deal in May? You helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating it with fascism. You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascism.
I look forward to taking questions when I get a chance to
father-in-law was an
finish my
Israel
statement.
lobbyist. Your grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirked through the whole thing every day. You smirked through a genocide.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that Matt Miller just conveniently showed up at the end.
It's good timing.
I was like, this couldn't actually work out better, that Matt Miller is trying to see me out the door.
What I love is your intervention comes just as Antony Blinken is doing his like performative sucking up to the media about how you ask the hard questions, and it's not always great to be on the receiving end, but it's vital for our democracy. And then you actually ask him a tough question that he never actually receives, or else he never would be up there in the first place. And also talk about how people of Gaza, including journalists, have been on the receiving end of his bombs, and that's just such a devastating rebuke. And those questions at the end, how does it feel that your legacy is genocide? That is the key question. And no one's asked him that yet. That's
Yeah.
the first time he's ever been asked that.
Yeah, I mean, there was the interview with Lulu Garcia Navarro from the New York Times where she sort of politely suggested that some may consider what happened in Gaza genocide.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, she had to be so respectful to him and then allow him to slyly slither his way out. But it would be so easy to trap him on that issue of genocide itself, whether it's a genocide, because he just declared that Sudan was a genocide while he's holding secret meetings with the United Arab Emirates, which is backing the RSF in Sudan that he's accusing of genocide. And he's holding meetings with the UAE on establishing a technocratic dictatorship in the Gaza Strip to control Palestinians and prevent them from resisting the Zionist project. So, I mean, it would just be so easy to trap him, but nobody dares. And at the press briefing the day before with Matthew Miller, reporter after reporter was thanking him for his work. They would all have to preface all their questions with, "Thank you for the work that you've done and for taking our questions." And he was just smiling his way through and no smirking. He was just like, you know, I really enjoyed this robust exchange we've had. And it's like a play acting of democracy when the institution of the State Department is fundamentally and irredeemably implicated in the Holocaust of our time. And these figures are playing the same role that Julius Streicher and Joseph Goebbels played in the previous one. And they're getting treated with total respect. What is it? The fourth wall? The fourth wall has to be broken in that situation. And I really have I've played out that scenario in my head so many times over the past year. How would I challenge Tony Blinken? How would I confront him? What questions would I ask? And there were some questions I forgot to ask there, but I think one of the key questions is also, why did you go to Israel on your first trip to help manage this genocide where you sat in the Hakiria complex, basically their version of the Pentagon in the middle of Tel Aviv, in their war room, and announced that you were there as a Jew? That's what he said. I am here as a Jew, not as a diplomat. You forfeit any leverage you might have had there, and you side with Israel on an ethno-religious basis. And that goes to the heart of who Tony Blinken is. As I mentioned, his father-in-law, Samuel Pisar, was a Israel lobbyist in France, where Tony Blinken was actually raised. He wasn't raised in, you know, the American heartland. He was the consigliere to Francois Mitterrand as like his Jewish fixer. He was also the fixer for Robert Maxwell, a Mossad agent who was the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. And Tony Blinken's grandfather also produced one of the first reports on the feasibility of colonizing Palestine. He ran an institute which funded that. So he played an instrumental role in founding apartheid Israel. Blinken has invoked this again and again. It's not something he hides. And this should be a question he should be asked. How can someone like that be a diplomat when you're fundamentally compromised by and sort of religiously connected to a state that is slaughtering people at an industrial capacity? It's just, he should have never been allowed to be in that position. It shows something just fundamentally wrong with our foreign policy establishment. So I was able to get that question out and to just lay before his feet the deliberate assassination of hundreds of journalists in the Gaza Strip, the destruction of the homes of friends of mine, like the journalist Shadi Abdul Rahman, who's been on our stream before, who cannot return to Gaza. His home was totally destroyed that he worked his whole life for. His wife stays up crying about the fact that she'll never be able to go back to Gaza. His kids ask, when are we going home? When are we going home? Rifat Al-Arir never got to say goodbye to him, was DMing with him days before he was deliberately assassinated in Shujaiya by the Israeli military with US-made weapons at his home for social media posts. Israel killed so many social media influencers, so many noble people of Gaza, professors, intellectuals, doctors, and it did so deliberately. And, I should have called out his name. I wanted to call out his name, but got to lay that at Tony Blinken's feet. And in some ways that was cathartic. And I wanted to ask him whether he would be returning to West Exec Advisors, his boutique consulting firm, which has cashed in on contracts with Israeli spy tech firms, including one that he handed to former White House press secretary and now MSNBC host Jen Psaki. Will he be cashing in on this genocide as well as on the Ukraine proxy war, where he's obstructed a peace process there again and again? So for me, it was just the most I could do. I felt like I had a responsibility to do it because I was able to get in that room. Many other reporters and other people couldn't. Many other people are dead. Other reporters are dead because of Tony Blinken. And so, I don't know, that was the best I could do. And I think you can see from the reaction to it that it struck a nerve. It struck a chord with lots of people around the world. And I'm hearing from people around the world, including in Gaza, who, felt like I guess it spoke for them. They wanted to say some of those same things.
Yeah.
And Tony Blinken, really, it's unusual for a Secretary of State in the U.S. to have that kind of global recognition, and also to be regarded so universally as a villain, especially a sort of dour and unspectacular character like Blinken. I mean, it's really remarkable.
Well, he's soulless in the way his eyes are so dead in the way he speaks, because he's turned into a sociopath. And going back to what you were talking about in terms of his actual record, being on the ground right after October 7th and basically taking part in the Israeli government's planning of its destruction of Gaza, he later admitted that Netanyahu told him that we don't want to allow a single aspirin into Gaza. Netanyahu told him this directly, but yet Blinken went out in public and spun on Israel's behalf, saying that Israel was not blocking humanitarian aid. There are reports that he approved or he endorsed Israel's plans to target aid trucks, which certainly Israel has done, even killing Blinken's friends at World Central Kitchen, which was delivering food inside Gaza. There's the documented fact that he censored the reports of his own experts who told him that Israel is blocking aid, and he went before Congress and lied and said the opposite. So this is someone who has been, has a long record, very well documented, of just outright complicity in one of the worst crimes in human history. And again, we're talking about a mass murder campaign against a defenseless death camp going on for more than a year. And even, what was it, a week ago, the State Department, Blinken's State Department, announced another $8 billion in weapons to Israel. So up until the last second, he's been doing his part in facilitating this genocide. And so it's, seeing him being called out today directly, I can see why there's so much gratitude for you and Sam around the world, Max, because you guys were giving voice to a message that's been silenced for so long, which is that Blinken himself personifies the Biden administration's complicity in this genocide. And the media, the people who, most of the media in that room who've been asking him questions have not been holding him to account. So this was a rare moment where some minimal accountability happened.